Hey y'all, hey, what is up? And welcome to another episode of the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast. We are up in here and as you all know, we are going to be talking all season long about Black maternal health issues, getting ready for the launch of the Black Maternal Health Database, because it's going to be located at blackmaternalhealthdata.com. And so we're going to be really breaking down all of the issues that Black moms face when we are trying to give birth to our babies, before we give birth to our babies, and during the process of pregnancy with our babies. Today, we have two phenomenal women, two phenomenal guests with us once again to really break down this subject. But first, we have to be reminded that Healthy Start is the official sponsor of the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast. So if you are looking for your tribe, you're looking for women who can really support you as your baby grows from birth to age 5, if you're looking for free diapers, if you need a doula, if you would like somebody to come on out to your house and help you make sure that you are doing this mom thing the best way that you possibly can, you need to head on over to healthystartpgh.org so that you can get you all the help that you need. Because we know here at the Brown Mamas community, we are all about making moms better moms so that dads can become better dads, children become better adults, and ultimately communities become better communities. So we are in this thing with you, and that means we're going to connect you to the resources and the people that you need to make sure you can live your best brown mama life. And speaking of people, let us introduce our guests. So today, tonight, whenever you are listening, viewing, reading, whatever you're doing right now, you have access to two bomb women. I've known Tiffany Huff-Strothers for a long time. She is one of my sisters that I keep in my pocket for when I need some help along this entrepreneurial journey. And I've learned so much from this woman. She doesn't know how much her voice echoes in my head sometimes. But Tiffany Huff-Strothers is a wife. She is a mother. She is hold on, I got it. Y'all know I get confused sometimes. I got to bring up the whole bio because this woman got titles for days. Okay, so I got to bring it up and I got to read it off the paper. We got Tiffany Huff-Strothers. She is a wife, a mother, and a woman of faith. She is called to minister and mentor women and is passionate about helping women reinvent themselves following their worst setbacks to make a major impact. She is also the executive director of When She Thrives. Hey, Tiff. Hey.
Hey, so happy to be here.
We are happy to have you. And next we have Iesha Thomas. I just met Iesha. I met Iesha in 2019 before all the ish went down.
Before yes, all the good times
went down, when we were still in good times. Yes, we were definitely still in good times. And let me tell you, this woman auditioned for the Brown Mama Monologues and left us speechless. Because first of all, we wasn't expecting nobody to be that good on day one. You know, when somebody come in and you like, how you that good at auditions? Like, for real. So she knocked our socks off with her poetry laced, just visual words about domestic violence. And, you know, ever since then, she's a part of the Brown Mama Monologues crew. You're going to be hearing her story. If you're in the Black Maternal Health Database right now, you can likely click right next to this video and watch Iesha's story. But Iesha is a mom of 5, and she is an investment advisor at Clearview Federal Credit Union. She is passionate about helping people, the arts and poetry, and financial literacy. In addition, Iesha is an author and a businesswoman. Welcome to the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast, Iesha.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
And we are excited to have you. So we are talking about domestic violence, and specifically, we are talking about domestic violence and how it affects Black women in particular. So y'all know I'm a story person. I love to listen to people's stories. I love to learn from people's stories. So we're going to start right there. Because both of these women, I forgot to mention that Tiff was in the first ever Brown Mama Monologues. And yes, she was. And she's another one. Tiff was ready at auditions. She had the same story on the day of auditions that she had when she hit the stage. So we got two phenomenal women. So who wants to go first? Just tell us don't tell us all your story, because both of y'all stories is probably going to be right next to this video. So just tell us a little bit about your experience with domestic violence and what inspires you to be who you are and do the work that you do. Don't all speak up at once. Who going first? All right, y'all want me to call names? All right, Tiff, you go first.
All right. So, well, without telling the whole story, I'll kind of give some context for my story. And I will start with this, and hopefully it'll lead to what else we'll talk about. People often will ask, why did I stay? Right? You're in an abusive relationship and you know he's not treating you right, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's emotional, mental, financial, whatever type of abuse it is. Once you've been abused, why do you stay? And for me, the answer is not the same as what you hear often. So ever since I was a little girl, my parents told me if you work hard at anything, you will do it and you will do it well and you'll have a great life. You make good grades, you'll get a good job. You'll get a scholarship, then you'll get a good job. And I did all of those things. And there was nothing that I tried to do that I did not do well, or in fact, exceedingly well. And so when I got into this relationship, I could not understand why I could not do it exceedingly well. And I was committed to my own demise, to seeing this relationship be done excellently, just like everything else in my life. And so I found myself almost like forcing myself to stay until I fixed it, until I realized I couldn't fix it, at which point I was facing the barrel of a gun and almost lost my life. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, this was like my high school sweetheart. We were young, we grew up together, we had children together. And I always tell people all the years of watching Lifetime didn't do me any good, because I was just like the woman on Lifetime. Just this, all of the experience taught me nothing. But the other thing that influenced, and I know you said we'll talk about environment, but one of the things that influenced me, like I said, was this addiction to achievement that I had. And then toward the end of the relationship, we ended up having children. So I wanted it to work for my children. But we grew up together. And so it was like he and I and me and him. And I just got tired. And when I got tired and I was like, I'm done. He was like, you're not done. Like, we in this. And so it literally ended with a bang. Yeah. And that's kind of what led me to doing the work that I do, because as a result of the way that things ended, I ended up homeless. I ended up very shortly after filing bankruptcy. I ended up in a 30-day domestic violence shelter. Like, my life literally, like in an instant, changed. Like, I went from here to like the lowest of the low, because I decided I'm not going to be abused anymore.
Thank you for your transparency, Tiff. And Tiff has a phenomenal story. I can't wait for you all to listen and hear it and learn about her can of worms, because it's really something that not only you are going to be able to see and walk through with her, regardless of whether you've experienced domestic violence or not, but her story is one that you can learn a lot from, about, like she said, this Black women tend to do that a lot. We have this assumed life path that we think we're going down.
Yes.
And then we're forced to open up our own can of worms. And it's like, okay, what am I gonna do with all this? So thank you for sharing, Tiff. Iesha, you want to chime in?
Sure. Well, much like Tiff, I was a high achiever. Just going through school, I always tried to achieve, whether I was playing sports, whether I was in the classroom. So I was trying to make this relationship work. It was with a childhood sweetheart of mine, and we were together from very young ages. And I did not really have an idea of what a healthy relationship was. I had no face to put to a healthy relationship. So not really understanding that I was in an abusive relationship, not knowing what that meant, but knowing how I felt. And those feelings, I think, were really the things that haunted me, right? It haunted me during the day. It haunted me at night. It haunted me at the different levels of our relationship. And then when I became a mother to our child, just that level of abuse haunted me even more. But really wanting it to work is what kept me right there, thinking I could fix it. So I think for me, it's just very important that I get people to understand, or at least share my story, so that they know that abuse doesn't only look like one thing, right? It's not somebody beating you upside the head. It's not a busted lip. There's emotional abuse, there's psychological abuse, there's sexual abuse. And it really comes down to how that makes you feel in that relationship. So nobody can tell you that how you feel, based on actions or words or being physically hit. Nobody can tell you that that's wrong to feel that way. So just trying to get people to really dig in and say, what is a healthy relationship? And why is it not healthy, and doing something or making changes just to implement a certain amount of health inside of those relationships.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think it's really important that because both of you talked about being high achievers, and we know that that is a characteristic that a lot of Black women have because we're trying to keep up this strong Black woman, veneer. And even though we've shed a lot of light on that in recent years, I feel like shedding a light on something doesn't mean that you cure it. It just means that you're now aware of it. So I think it's really important in this moment that we talk about environmental factors, because it's important that we help Black women to understand there's not something wrong with you, because we also know that Black women disproportionately experience domestic violence. So there's all types of environmental factors that go into the reason why we feel like we have to, keep up this veneer of perfection, this veneer of I can achieve it, I can do it. There's all types of things that go into that. And I'll just say with my own experience, it's important that we know it looks different. Because for me, I didn't know I was in a domestically abusive relationship until the police were being called. And I was running, trying to get away from this man. There had been emotional abuse, but I didn't realize I was going to be hit. It knocked my socks off. I did not understand what was happening because I had never thought that that was going to be something that was going to happen to me. But now that I look back on it, I'm like, the telltale signs were there. I was being isolated from my family. I was being told what I could and could not do. There were things that were happening that were leading up to that instance. And even though for me, it didn't go beyond that night, because after that, my mom just snatched me out. She was like, nope, this isn't happening around my grandson. We're just not having this. But there were definitely things that were happening. I was depressed. My house was a mess. Like, there were things that were happening that I didn't even realize I was headed to this point. And I remember my mom telling me, like, this is not going to end well. You need to know that this is not going to end well. So I would love to get you all's perspective, especially for the moms who are listening, about what was happening in your life around that time that made your situations such a right place for domestic violence to occur.
Well, I know I can speak about my experience, Muffy. I was roughly about 16, 17 years old when I first started dating this older gentleman. And I lived with my grandmother. I didn't have parents around. My parents really didn't have any hand in raising me. And I just didn't have a healthy relationship to really compare anything to. The fact that he was showing me attention, and maybe he would buy me things that he knew that I liked. I mistakenly thought that that was some sense of love, right? So not really understanding that that doesn't necessarily translate to love. I was in a very, very vulnerable state in my life, young, inexperienced, not really having anyone to look up to say, okay, this is a healthy relationship. Whatever I was given by way of a relationship, I basically took. I didn't know that there were good ones and bad ones. So in life taught me those things over the years, but not having parents, that can say, wait a minute, this isn't right. Not having older people in my life that can look at the situation and say, wait a minute, something's going on. So I allowed myself to be physically pulled out of courts, because at the time I lived in the projects, so they were courts, and not really understanding that was abuse. I allowed, the verbal abuse to continue and not really understand that that was verbal abuse. So I felt like I was handling things on my own, and I was dealing with things on my own. So just that young inexperience really, really left me to stay in a situation that I should not have been in for a very long time.
Mm. So for me, it was a little bit different. One of the things in my environment prior to getting into this relationship, um, I was like the one, I was the one who was going to make it. And so I had all of those pressures, but my sister was like me. She was very smart. She had, the good grades. And then she became a teenage mom. She got pregnant in her freshman year of high school, I'm pretty sure. And so my mind was focused on not becoming a teenage mom. And so by the time I started dating the father of my children, I was a senior in high school. I was focused on college. Like I had beat the odds, so to speak, right? Like I didn't get pregnant. I was on my way to college. I was doing all of the things. So my guard was down, kind of like Iesha said. There was not that I didn't know right from wrong, right? But there was not necessarily, our culture is not one that doesn't, uh for lack of a better way to say it, glorify domestic violence. Like, it's cute. Oh, he calling you all of the time, that mean he really really like you. Oh, he showing up places where you was at, showing off, he crazy about you. No, he has a problem, right?
Right,
But
right.
until it's gone too far, you don't realize it's gone too far. And so my environment was, number one, I was still the one who made it. I still had the good job. I had the new car. I was doing all the things that you do after you graduate from college, but behind closed doors, I was suffering. And so I created an environment that had boundaries so that what he was doing to me was kept secret. Because again, I was addicted to that achievement. I didn't want people to know what was going on. But before I got into the relationship, I was so focused on making it for my family, right? It was those pressures that, how could I possibly tell my family that I'm involved in this relationship that is no good for me?
Mm-hmm.
So it was partially the challenges that I experienced, that my family experienced growing up, and then that added on pressure to be the one in the family to do well. And then I think also too, just kind of like Iesha said, when you don't have that foundation, I went from being like the smart one in the family to being his girlfriend. Like, I didn't have an identity for Tiffany. So I was constantly being put in these containers and had to figure it out within those containers without really being fully self-aware and understanding who I was and what I wanted. I was allowing people to prescribe those things to me, and that's what became dangerous.
And if I can just second what Tiffany said too, you're right. Our culture does glorify some level of abuse, right? Girl, he following you. Wow, I can't believe he digging you like that. So growing up, we thought it was cute. We didn't realize that this would ultimately escalate to something that was so unbearable, right? And so traumatizing and so just, unrecognizable, that we wish we had done something years before, right? Just not really understanding that, wait a minute, you need to stop this now. Don't let this continue, because it's not cute, right? You need to normalize being in a healthy relationship and not someone who's physically abusive or verbally abusive or calling you names when you don't do exactly what they want you to do. So for me, just the level of information wasn't there, as to what did a healthy relationship look like, right? How did he speak to you, when it was healthy? How did he act around you? How did he talk to you in front of your friends? So these things just were not there to reference, so as things were happening, you accepted it as normal, right? Just didn't realize that this is so abnormal. This really isn't supposed to happen. And if you wait 10 years, 20 years, you're going to wish you had stopped it. So a lot of things was there. The red flags were there. Things that looking back, I wish I would have stopped. I wish I would have said, wait a minute, time out. I don't like that. I don't like how that makes me feel. Don't do that. But I didn't. I thought it was all normal behavior. So, I wish, again, that I had reacted so much different from age 17, 18, 19, clear up into my 20s. That could have just saved a lot of what I went through.
And I also think that the communication is not there. And that's kind of what I talked about in my monologue. Like, I've always had open dialogue with my children because I want them to ask me for the truth. I don't want them going somewhere else for the truth. And so when there isn't an environment in your home where anything can be discussed, or you feel like you can go to someone in your household to talk about something, whether it's your period or the fact that your boyfriend is hitting you, right? If
Mhm.
you don't feel like that's a conversation you can have with someone in your family, then you go inward with it, right? You begin to suppress it, and the longer you're doing that, the longer, like Iesha said, you begin to normalize these things that are abnormal. But that's why being able to communicate with your children and your children knowing they can communicate with you is so important.
And who do you go to, right? When you're in a situation where you're watching other women get abused, when you're watching other women get beat, with different household objects or talked to in a way that is very verbally abusive, who do you talk to? Who do
Mm.
you talk to? Do you tell them, that you're also experiencing those very same things, maybe not to the level of degree? So there's questions as to where your resources, where's your support system?
Right.
When you're young, when you're teenagers, you're searching for that support system. And sometimes it's there if you're lucky, if you're fortunate, and sometimes it's just not there to have these conversations.
Mm. And even when we have, I feel like, I know with my situation, I feel like my family is a great support to me, but there were definitely conversations that were not happening. There
Mhm.
were conversations that, there were a lot of conversations that were not happening that I didn't know because nobody told me. I was more so warned against things, warned against people and situations and experiences, but not necessarily told how that happens, why it happens, what it looks like. So, one of
Mhm.
the common threads I hear going through all of the issues we've talked about this season and in terms of the Black Maternal Health Database is this commonality of children not being exposed, or grown people who remember that as children they were not properly exposed to information that would have allowed them to make better decisions in their adulthood.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I heard Iesha say that, especially I remember because I was living in the projects with my when I had gave birth to my oldest son, and I remember domestic violence was palpable.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it
absolutely.
was palpable. Like there were always, I remember vividly, I was washing my clothes and I was bringing my clothes back from like the little community laundromat, and a girl had said she was out on the curb and she was like, y'all know he's in here hitting me. Why come nobody won't say nothing? And I just remember being like, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know how to help this woman, but she clearly is yelling out for help. And I remember situations where women were, like you said, dragged out of the court. I was one of those women who was dragged out of the court.
Dragged out of
I
the court. Yes,
remember, and
ma'am.
nobody came out to help me. I literally had to go not bang on a neighbor's door, like, somebody please let me in. If it wouldn't have been for that woman, and she was an older woman, that was the only reason why I knew she would open the door, because nobody came outside to help me at all. So I
Mhm.
think that we do have a tendency in our community to normalize these things because we're so used to growing up with it, whether it is, growing up with direct domestic violence experiences, or growing up where somebody in your household is being verbally or emotionally abused.
And
Mhm.
the other part of it too is that we nurture it, right? Because I'm sure both of you can relate to talking to so and so's mom and her saying, "Why you gonna put my son in jail?" Or, whatever it is that she is
Mhm.
saying to you to make you feel like you have the power to to do something detrimental to his life. Never
Mhm.
mind the
Mhm.
fact that you got dragged out of the court. Why does he have to go to jail for that? Does he have to be penalized? You gonna take your kids away? My grandkids won't be able to see their dad because y'all got into an argument, but it's so much bigger than that. It's
So
it's
much bigger. Thank you.
but
So
it's
much bigger.
downplayed at the convenience of other members of the community. We begin to become sacrificed at the expense of someone else having to be challenged or held accountable for their own actions. And I think, unfortunately, that influences our decisions and behaviors way too often. Way too often.
I agree with you.
Absolutely.
And also, I'd like to touch a little bit, if I can, just on a level of trauma and how you honestly suppress a lot when you go through certain levels of trauma, right? So, you don't really remember all the things that happened to you until somebody else bring them up. And you're like, wow, that did happen. You know, I remember you being there when I got beat or dragged or yanked or when he said those things. But that level of suppression, just so that you can try to maintain from a mental, emotional, and psychological standpoint, it's just, it's amazing how that works, right?
Iesha, I don't even know if you remember this, but we both had those need scholarships, right? You had a
Yes.
scholarship from Need, right?
Yep,
And
I
we
sure
had the
did.
internships in the summer through
Yes.
UPMC.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
one particular summer, I was going through so much in this relationship. And like you said about suppressing, I would show up at work with these outlandish stories about
Mm-hmm.
what happened, why I was late, or why I didn't come to work. But really, it was because of the drama I was dealing with him. And I'll never forget one day I told a lie about why I couldn't come to work. And my supervisor called the number back on the caller ID, and he answered the phone. And of course, he had no idea of the story I had told her. I lost. That was that internship was one we were supposed to have every summer during our 4-year college experience, with the hope that we would go right into a position with UPMC. They told me I could not come back after
Wow.
that second summer
Wow.
because
Okay.
of how much drama and trauma that I was dealing with him, and trying to keep up with these lies so that I didn't look like I was irresponsible or not able to handle a job, because that wasn't it at all. I was just emotionally and mentally exhausted. Exhausted. I still cringe about the fact that I lost that experience
And
because
these,
it was no fault of my own, really.
Mhm.
right. And these things have a way of just showing up, right? 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, in little things, in big things, in all things, right? And we're
Yeah.
like, wow, you know, I can identify it now, but there were so many periods in life where I just could not make the parallel. You
Mhm.
know, I didn't parallel one thing to the other. You know, I have a very, very good friend, and she would ask me questions all the time. Aisha, you remember this? And I had blocked out so many different blocks of time
Mm,
because of the trauma that I didn't remember a lot of the things that she said I should remember. You don't remember that? I said, I don't. That was the time period in which I was either, you know, just experiencing so high levels of trauma that I had to block out chunks of time, right? Just so that
Anxiety.
I can continue to maintain, you know,
Mhm.
whatever it was that I was, you know, going through.
and that's even before children, right? Like, I'm talking about abuse and challenges that were even before the children were in the picture.
Mhm.
So just imagine how much more complicated it becomes when you're pregnant and then you bring a child into a relationship, you know?
And what I'm hearing both of you ladies really talk about is we're talking about high levels of mental illness among Black men
Mm,
and the people who are domestically violating women, and high levels of trauma among Black women.
yeah.
So sometimes experiences that are so traumatic that we don't remember, that we completely change our lifestyles and the impetus for our lifestyles in order to accommodate these new traumatic experiences. And so
Mhm.
I think we can safely say that mental illness plays a huge part, and the ways in which we handle mental illness plays a huge part in making situations, ripe for domestic violence to occur. And I
Absolutely.
think, especially one of the things that other cultures do oftentimes that we don't do nearly enough is that when we're in a relationship and we're struggling, they seek out mental health resources. So whether that's a therapist, I remember the first time me and my husband went to a therapy retreat. And I was like, I didn't even know people did this. Like, I had no idea that this is how white folks worked on their marriages. Like, they went to these mental health retreats and broke down their problems and voiced their concerns. And I just remember leaving that with so much relief. And me and my husband has never domestically abused me. But I just remember thinking, if I had had any of these type of resources in any relationship that I'd ever been in prior to that, how would those relationships have turned out? So I think, it's safe to make some connections between mental illness, the lack of treatment that Black folks oftentimes get from mental illness, and the high rates of domestic violence in our communities.
And it's
So,
not even just, I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt. It's
oh,
not
go ahead, go ahead.
just treatment, it's even acknowledging
Yep.
that there is a mental health concern, right?
Yes.
We don't, well, I feel like it's gotten better and it's getting better.
Hmm.
But in the season that I'm talking about, we were not even acknowledging, like I said, it was like, oh, he crazy, like that's cute. That is not cute. It's like
That
something
is
is
not
really
cute.
wrong with him, right? And us being okay with the reality that it's not our responsibility, nor should we feel bad about the need to fix said person.
Right.
Like that's not our responsibility.
Absolutely.
And we've been carrying the burden for way too long.
And then there's a misconception that the abuse is going to stop with you, right? Oh, he's just going to do that to me. He's not going to abuse anybody else. He doesn't do that with anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a huge misconception, because how many times is that same abusive person, right, turn around and now become abusive to the children, become abusive to their family, their in-laws, just other people, around them, they become abusive to those people as well.
Yeah.
So it's, the misconception that, well, he just loves me, so that's why he treats me like that. I think that is just really not on point at all.
Yeah, because
Not
the
at all.
isolation in and of itself is an abusive technique when you try
Yes,
to keep mothers away from their daughters and daughters away from their fathers and daughters away from their aunts and there is a level of, I mean, it's tactical at the end of the day. So I
it
think
is.
even when those behaviors, I mean, you could definitely say that those are learned behaviors that person has probably had since childhood. But it makes them no less tactical in nature. And so that in and of itself is abuse, is familiar abuse, is what I would call it, like familial abuse, because families need to be together. That's one of the misconceptions in our society, is that we can operate in independence, and we really can't. We really do need each other, and we really do need to maintain those family bonds in order to have healthy lives. So I wanted to talk a little bit next just about, if a woman is experiencing domestic violence and you see it and it's happening, what can you say to her? What can you do? Can you even help? Because I remember, like I said, my mother told me, she said, Muffy, this is not going to end well. She said, she just came out and told me, eventually he's going to hit you. I didn't believe her. I was like, no, that's not going to happen. He's a nice man.
He's a nice man.
That's what I thought. He's a nice man. She was like, no, he might be a nice man with us, but we can clearly see that's not what he is with you.
Mhm.
So, but like I said, I didn't believe her. It wasn't until I was being dragged out the court that I believed her. So,
Mhm.
what
Yeah,
can you say?
I think what you don't want to say, at least not right off the bat, is like, leave him, break up with him, because what that is going to do is cause her to block you out.
Yes.
And you want to at least, I mean, I'm gonna just keep it real. You want her to talk to you. You want to know what's going on. You want to be able to support her, right?
Mhm.
So, I would say that you want to, and it's a fine line, because at a certain point, it's like, all right, sis, this has been going on for 20 years. You gonna leave, or you just gonna keep dealing with this? But if it's something that is newer, something that you're just learning about, something that a girlfriend or a family member is being challenged with, you need to just be there and let her tell you what she needs. Right?
Mhm.
That's not to say that you can't say something like, he should not be hitting you, or you don't deserve this, but you really need to just be there for her. Let her tell you what she thinks she needs. Because when you start to project, then that could be received as a familiar type of abuse, right? That very similar to what she's getting from him. So I think that more than anything, people need to know that you're there and you're available and willing to support. Then they need you to tell them what you think they should do. And usually it's not out of judgment that we do that. We just want to help them, and we want them to get out, and we want them to be safe. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't want that for a person, but what I am saying is that you kind of have to allow them to have the control, because in that relationship, they don't have any control and they're
Mhm.
already feeling powerless.
And I know for me, I think what would have helped for me is that I knew someone was there, right, that I could talk to, that would be supportive, that would listen to me, and then offer up solutions, right? So it's one thing to say, you shouldn't be with him, or you need to leave that relationship. But what's the solution really? When you have a young child, when you have children, when there's resources that you don't have, we need solutions, right? You just can't tell me to just up and leave and then I have nowhere to go.
Right.
You know, I need the support plus the solution. And I need someone just to listen to me, right? And just help me to kind of understand that these things are not normal, that I do deserve, I deserve, right? She deserves. We all deserve a healthy relationship.
Right.
Because sometimes it really comes down to, is that what you feel like you deserve? You know, have you been beaten down so much so that you don't even think you deserve a healthy relationship? And
Yeah.
that's a part of it too. Just trying to get women, trying to get myself, trying to get, you know, mothers to understand that you do deserve to be loved and in a healthy relationship. And then being a support and offering solutions with that level of support. I think that would have drastically helped change my situation.
Yeah, and it's challenging, because it's a process. And I think now about someone that I am connected to that actually is in a relationship with somebody in my family. That's not a good relationship. And I know that I cannot constantly say leave, leave, leave because of the situation. But if she calls me and says this person has done XYZ, we don't have anything to eat, I can send food. I can order a pizza and get it delivered.
Mhm.
I can say Walmart will bring you groceries, or I can help with certain things. But it's also the conversations that Iesha is talking about. Like, what is it that you really want for you and your children?
Right.
And do you really think that this person can get into a place so that he could be part of that? Right?
Mhm.
Because if not, then how can I support you in getting those things that you want for you and your children? That's not blatantly saying leave him. That's saying let's look at an alternative path that you are safe and healthy and your children are safe and healthy. Period.
Mhm.
And it's been going on much longer than I would like to see it. But if nothing else, I know that she knows that she can call if there's a need. If something is wrong, I'll do whatever I can to support her. But like I said, it's a thin line because you also do not want to become an enabler.
Mhm.
So you got to have discernment in that way.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that we recognize that domestic violence is the result of habits over a long period of time that we develop, that person has developed, that you've developed. And so, just like any other habit, it's really hard to stop any habit cold turkey. Like,
Yes.
you have to give yourself a gradual out. Even with my situation where my mom pretty much was like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. That didn't mean I stopped talking to him, because I didn't. It took me about a year to like
Okay.
completely wean myself out of that relationship.
Mhm.
Um, because I had habits. There were certain things I was used to doing and I wasn't just going to stop them. So I think, if you are a person who's going through this, I understand you can't just leave right away, but you can begin a gradual process of
Right.
moving yourself out of that environment. And you may have to do some things in secrecy. There may be some things you're not going to be able to, tell him about. So there may be some things, conversations you're going to have with some other folks in private so that you can get out of that situation. But I think if you're an outside person looking in, you just can't expect that person to just stop because they've been hit,
Mhm.
just stop because they've been yelled at, just stop because that person took all their money. It doesn't work like that. That's not even how humans are hardwired. We don't, once we set a habit in motion, not only our minds but our bodies are physically supporting that habit, so it
Right.
just takes time. um, and I also wanted to talk about community, because just like situations can be ripe for domestic violence to occur, communities can create spaces where domestic violence can't occur, or at least where there's minimal, there's a decrease and there are minimal instances of domestic violence.
That's
Let's
right.
talk a little bit about that. And specifically, I'd like to talk about that in the context of the work you do with When She Thrives. And how you are helping women not only to recover from situations where they may have been, experience domestic violence, but also to create lifestyles and communities that support, their continued success in life.
I think one of the things that enriches this experience and all of the things that we do with When She Thrives is that we really are working to destigmatize the things that are stigmatized. Because if there is no stigma, then we're going to be more willing to talk about it. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to know all of your business. But what that does mean is that that whole what happens in this house stays in this house, it needs to shift, right? There are
Mhm.
some boundaries that need to be set, but I need to be able to have people that I'm connected to, like you or Iesha, that I can call and say, this is what's going on. I know it's not right and I don't know what to do. I
Yes.
messed up in this way and I don't want to keep messing up in this way. What do you think I can do to get back on track? We need to be able to have safe spaces where we can have conversations that are hard. We need to have courageous conversations. And so we create environments for women to do that. And we connect women in relationships with other women that they will be willing to do that with, and also, empowering them and teaching them to create said environments for their children so that there is less happening where people are suffering in silence, whatever age you're at. And that's kind of what sets When She Thrives apart from a lot of other programs or nonprofits that serve women and moms. It's like, somebody can get you a job, somebody can help you get a resume, somebody can buy you an outfit. But if the work that needs to be done on the inside is not happening, you're going to consistently live in these cycles where you need somebody to give you an outfit and you need somebody to give you a job, or you need to get back on welfare. And that's not to say that these supports are not helpful when we have a situation, but those supports should be the exception and not the rule. So really breaking down those barriers. So it's like, yeah, this happened. This is what happened. This is what won't happen again, because I'm willing to say this happened and I'm really willing to learn about what needs to be done and then do the work. And I don't have to do it alone because I now have this community of women who can support and encourage and hold me accountable to consistently moving forward.
Absolutely. You need to go to whenshethrives.org to find out more information about this organization and the work that they're doing to help moms to do the internal work. Because so much of these Black maternal health issues that we're talking about are because we haven't done any internal work. Iesha, I would love to hear about your exit from domestic violence, from your domestic violence situation, and how you were able to muster the courage, to get out of it.
So for me, getting out of it meant leaving the city altogether. I relocated because I didn't see a way to live inside the city and be able to work on the issues that I was dealing with on the inside, and still having to combat that abusive relationship because I do have um, a child or children by him. So for me, my exit was complete relocation. I know that's not possible for everyone, but that's what works for me, or worked for me. I had to completely leave my fee. I had to just, put everything that I could in the van with my kids and leave. And whatever came after that was going to have to come down the road and get me 6, 7, 8 hours away, because they wasn't going to get me around the corner. And that's just the only option that I seen even working. I just didn't see another option.
That's exactly what I did. Um,
Okay.
yeah, like I said, I ended up getting shot and I ended up in a shelter. And when I got out of that shelter, which was a very minimal time, it was a 30-day shelter. So when I got out of there, the trauma that I was dealing
Mhm.
with, right, he hadn't been arrested yet. So I was kind of like wide open, like when you've been in a relationship with somebody for almost 10 years, there's nowhere you can go that they don't know. They know where your mama lived, they know where your friend lived, your cousin's cousin, I didn't feel safe. I felt like everybody was looking at me. People had seen me on the news and I just needed a change. Like Aisha said, I needed to be in a space where I could breathe and do the work to get myself together. And that was not going to happen here. It wasn't.
And it's just what I found to be the easiest thing. I had tried everything, right? I tried, okay, you live on your side of the city, I live on mine. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. I was terrified for so many years. Nothing worked. And one day I said, you know what? If I can get away from the city, maybe I'll have a chance of doing some internal work. And for me, it worked out for the better. But I understand women who may not be able to do that. And I think for me, my heart just kind of breaks for them. You know, what solutions do they have? You know, what resources do they have? Where's their support system? Because maybe they can't throw their children in a van and go down the road 8 hours. You know, they deserve happiness and a healthy relationship as well.
I'm curious. Hopefully this is okay to ask, Muffy. What made you? Why did you come back, or how did you decide that it was safe to come back?
So my mother got really sick. And so I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was going to and just fight up against whatever I had to fight up against. And I decided that spending time with her was much more important to me than anything. And whatever I had to go through, I just had to go through.
Okay. I was just curious. My situation is a little bit different in
Mhm.
that he died. He was murdered. So I
Oh, so
felt
sorry.
like, I could come back and have a semi-normal life.
Okay.
Wow.
I felt very strongly that we could not occupy the same space. Like we had become cordial, and we pretty much reconciled before he passed away. And the distance did us a lot of good. We were able to get along much better with the distance in between us because he didn't have complete control. Um,
Okay.
but I would never, even though we had come as far as we came, I would never have been able. I don't think I would have ever been comfortable occupying this same domain with him.
Okay. And you know what? I didn't want anything to happen to my mother and me not be here.
Yeah, I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
So it was just time to fight, right? For lack of a better term, it was just time to fight.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm glad that I came back because some things happened with her health wise that had I not been here, the story would have unfolded a little bit differently.
Mhm.
Just with her being in the hospital and decisions that had to be made. So I'm very grateful that I was here, but it's not easy. It's still not easy. It's still not easy. And we're talking 20 years. It's still not easy.
Well, thank you for both of you for sharing that. I think we've even just in the midst of conversation, we've pretty much answered all the questions.
Yeah.
But I think one thing it's important to just say is, you know, if there's a mom who's watching this right now, what advice would you give her? About if she's in the midst of a domestically violent situation, what advice would you give a mom?
For me, I would tell her to seek out someone that she can trust, that she can talk to. And maybe more than someone, maybe a group of people, try to find someone or a group of people that she really feels comfortable talking to, and then seek out the resources. There are resources out there that can help. You just got to go find them. You got to go find the fit. You got to, just really get brave and find those resources and ultimately find out how you want things to end and let that be your deciding factor on how you move forward.
I would have to agree. I would encourage her to find a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage her to find a mental health professional or a counselor or someone who, even above and beyond the level of experience and insight we have, can help her and also potentially guide her to some other resources. And the other thing that I would say, again, very similar to what Iesha said, is make a decision. Because I knew that night while that gun was on the ridge of my nose and between my eyes for what felt like hours, I knew at that last moment, right before I got shot, I knew that I could say, you know what, I'm sorry. Let's lay down. We'll talk about it in the morning. I could have talked him down and laid back, but I decided like this is it. So if I
Mm-hmm.
have to lose my life, like I'm standing up for myself tonight. I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm not saying it has to be that extreme, but if you know that this is not what you want, you know this is not the life you want for your child or your children, decide. Because once you decide, there's going to come a point where something's going to happen and you just going to snap, and everything's going to change for better or for worse. And I'm also encouraging anyone, whether they're in the domestic violence situation or not, to get your license to carry and begin to do so. Okay.
I know that's right.
I do not, I'm not like a gun advocate. My kids have never been allowed to play with guns, not even water guns. But at this juncture, we are just not being protected the way that we need to be. And so we have to, you know, we have to be responsible to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. Don't keep the status of the unprotected, because you don't have to be unprotected.
And don't suffer silence. If you take nothing away from our conversation, please talk to somebody.
Because there's somebody out there that wants to help you.
Yes,
a lot of times we think that there's nobody that's going to help, but just from running the Pittsburgh Brown Mamas group, one thing I've learned is there's always somebody that wants to help.
Yes.
There is always somebody that's like, I'll be the one. So sometimes it just takes for you to, say something. And also for everybody who's watching this, whether you're a health practitioner, whether you are I don't know if you're somebody from the media, whoever you are, if you know somebody who is in a domestically violent situation, be their support. Because in our society, I've been saying this for weeks now, because it's something that I just came upon. We sometimes put the impetus on the victims of the crime, on the victims of the stigma, to help themselves, instead of realizing if you see it and you know what's going on and you decide not to do anything about it, you're just as guilty as the person who's doing it, because you're basically allowing that person to suffer in silence, knowing that, especially being a mother, even when you're not a new mom, being a mother is a vulnerable situation to be in, period, because you have these people who you are constantly responsible for their life and death. So just the very act of bearing children puts you in a vulnerable situation pretty much for the rest of your life. So don't always put the impetus on moms that moms need to help moms. Sometimes we need that mail from the outside. Sometimes we need that doctor. Sometimes we need that person. And how we don't need you to help us is we don't need you to call the authorities to take our children off of us. What we do need is for you to get us some resources so that we can feel more comfortable to take the steps for ourselves. So take the impetus off of the people who are being unprotected, the people who are being victimized, to help themselves, and put yourself in a position where you can actually be of assistance to us. With that said, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for, the conversations that you're having and the spaces that you continue to create, because it's so important.
It is.
I appreciate that. Do y'all want to tell us where to find y'all? Or is there any work you're doing that is associated with this topic that you want to share a little bit more about before we get off of, before we end this?
At When She Thrives is at When She Thrives on all social media platforms. The website is whenshethrives.org. We are about to launch a new cohort of SOAR, which is an acronym for Successfully Overcoming Adversity with Resilience. And it's a cohort-based program that functions at the center of self-care and social justice. So really teaching moms and their children to be advocates for themselves in their homes and their schools, and also looking at how we can use our power and our voices to make change in the community while we are caring for ourselves. So that's what's to come. And if you want to follow me, I'm at the Tiffany Huff on all social media.
And I love this. I've been watching the SOAR stuff, and I'm loving the social justice component that y'all are now putting with. I think that's going to be so dope.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be awesome, because I just feel like anytime you can give moms an opportunity to be empowered, to
Yes.
actually
Mhm.
do the work in their own communities, like it just has so many ripple effects through not only, the moms they encounter, but through the children and through the generations, really. So that's definitely awesome. Iesha, are you working on anything that you want to tell us about right now?
So just stay tuned to IeshaThomas.com. Everything will be kind of put on the website. I would like to, and I've talked to some people about this, just provide that level of shelter, right? Because we are in a housing crisis, just working with some different organizations to really provide shelter for women who are really fleeing from domestic abusive relationships. So that is to come. So I'm
And we
currently
didn't
working
even
with them.
touch on COVID and domestic violence.
We did not.
Yes.
That'll
And
be
I,
the next one. Go ahead.
please, I just want to share now that Iesha brought that up. We also do Growing Through grants, which
Mhm.
are rapid
Okay.
response crisis prevention grants. So these grants are a purpose to be to prevent hunger, to prevent homelessness, to prevent unemployment or interruption of any basic needs. So if you're in need of shelter or you need to flee and you need some financial support or you need clothes or supplies or food for yourself or your children, please get connected with us. We do not want you to be, again, suffering in silence or feeling like there is no support for you, because there is.
Absolutely. So
Awesome.
whenshe and IeshaThomas.com, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So those are two websites. And of course, you'll be able to find those in the show notes. You'll also be able to find those at wherever you see this video at, just look down below, because
Or above it.
that's where you're going to be that's where you're going to be able to find more information about these two phenomenal women who have lived, who are walking. What do they say? Not walk it like I talk it, walk it, walk like they're doing that. They're actually doing it. So, look for them. And you can always go to brownmamas.com. You can find tons of stuff there. Depending on what day of the week it is depending on what you're gonna find.
And we were there as well.
Yeah.
We were in that group as well. So
Yes, definitely. You can find when you can find both of these women talking in the Pittsburgh
Yes.
Brown Mamas group.
yes.
So don't forget about that. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast. We are excited to just have you listen, have you come here, find resources. I love talking. So any chance I can get to talk to you, to empower you, to inspire you, to help you to live your best Brown Mama life, I'm here for that. So thank you for your time. We appreciate you. Thank you, Tiff. And thank you, Iesha.
Thank you, Muffy. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Always a pleasure.
All right, y'all. Peace.
Yes. It's a pleasure.